Hello and welcome to the Power Hour. This is our monthly session for our professional community to help them give them some ideas and energy in marketing and business development. This is the 5th edition of this session. We've covered so far many topics from social media and marketing to give you the ideas and inspiration you need to keep moving forward. Joined by 2 audiences today, one of PCD members here on Zoom with us, and also a valued audience on YouTube with us. So welcome to both of those audiences. We'll take questions as we move through the session in the chat. Would really love to hear from you on what you think and get your questions answered through this session. So today I'm joined by Kirsten Burt. Welcome, Kirsten.
Hello, nice to see you.
So great to have you on today. And perhaps you could just give a quick introduction to yourself and give us a sense of what we're going to be talking about in today's Power Hour.
Great, David. Thanks for having me. My name's Kirsten Burt. So I've been in the UK wealth management private client industry for the last 15 years. As you can tell, I still have an American accent, even though I've been here a long time. I started my career in sort of US banking at places like Citibank and American Express in the US. And then for 6 years, I was head of marketing at Standard Chartered Private Bank. And then for 6 years, I was head of marketing at UBS in the UK. So kind of know everything about wealth management marketing, and then went out on my own a couple of years ago to be a consultant and help UK wealth managers with their sort of business development, sales strategy, marketing strategy, growth strategy. So I've had some really exciting projects in the last couple of years, and really excited to share with you kind of what I'm seeing from my clients. What we're going to talk about today is, again, this social selling topic, but I'm going to hopefully come at it from a different angle about how you should be getting supported from your company. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about this idea of marketing and sales working really closely together, which I think, given the pandemic and given how digital we all are now, is an even more important topic than it used to be. And it's always been important. So I'll share some tips on how you can get the most out of your marketing department, build good relationships with them, and hopefully kind of build success together.
Fantastic. I mean, I imagine across the course of your career, you'd seen marketing change a huge amount from when you started, you said, in US banks through to later roles, and the projects you take on now must have a very different look and feel and focus to what would have been the marketing strategy going back 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to get investments online, I think, my whole career. And I remember the first time we got, kind of buy, sell, trade actively online without paper. So that's, I mean, it makes me sound very old. But yeah, so I think, marketing in the UK has come a long way. Marketing within wealth managers and private client has come a long way. But I think the lovely thing about this industry is it's still very personality driven. It's still very relationship driven. It's still very sales driven. So most marketing departments should be really focused on how to help you as advisors and lawyers, accountants, trust companies, whatever you do, really empower you to make those sales and build those relationships.
Fantastic. Well, look, let's get into the content. If you want to share your slides, that would be great. And I will pose interesting questions as we move along. And also we'll take any questions from the floor as we move through.
I need to flip this. Hold on. Okay, can you see that all right?
Great, perfect.
So I'm just going to reiterate some of the statistics about everything that's changed in the past year and just how important social selling is now. So we know that 29 to 30% of leads globally come in from social media. So as an advisor now or a lawyer now, you should be thinking that this is your second biggest sales channel after referrals. So keep your clients happy, make sure they refer, but this is your next biggest priority. 84% of financial advisors are using LinkedIn. And from a marketing point of view, there's much higher click-through rates from people posting versus corporates posting. You're always going to be able to add more personality when it's a person. And then we know that there's over 400,000 high net worths in LinkedIn right now in the UK. And of course, that's growing in lots of other places. So LinkedIn is a priority. I'll talk a little bit about the other social media networks because we can't forget about them. And then this is really about the program element. So I think in previous sessions, a lot of people have talked about how you as an advisor do it. I'm hoping that your institutions, your companies are supporting you. And these are some of the things, if they're not, to go knock on doors and try to get them to support you better. Because if this is the second biggest sales channel, your senior management and your marketing department should be all over this. So I think when you go talk to senior management, you need to tell them that this is really important, that this is life post work from home. This is life post COVID. It's not going to go away. The days of running 1,000 events and cocktail hours to meet high net worth is not going to come back the way it used to be. When you talk to your marketing department, I think one of their key jobs for you as an advisor is to make sure that all the good content that's lurking around the institution needs to be teed up for you in an easy way. So when I was at UBS, we did this whole exercise where we scoured the whole globe for really good content for advisors to use. And that's really one of their most important jobs. They should be providing you with tooling. So you should have a social media tool you can use day to day that's teeing up content for you, that's doing the compliance for you so you don't get sort of mired in pre-approvals for compliance. And it should be helping you measure, and it should be helping you sort of campaign. So at a click of a button, kind of launch a campaign, and then you don't have to do as much manual work. You should be getting training. Hopefully your company is getting somebody like Graham in, Graham Aitken, who I think did a session a few weeks back, to make sure that you're trained. And then there is slightly different nuances, and I'm talk about this in a minute, about how you do sort of LinkedIn strategy for intermediaries. So if you're a lawyer, how you talk to, say, bankers, versus how you connect with end entrepreneurs or end professional audiences. So you should get some training on that. And then hopefully everybody in the institution is measuring. So if you don't measure it, it's not going to get invested in. If you don't measure it, nobody's going to get excited about it as a sales win. So you have to measure it. So you need to get a feed into your CRM so you know what leads are coming through. You need to measure how much AUM is coming in from this sort of initiative. And then you need to iterate and grow. So typically a program will start out small, maybe with a few advisors or with a tool you're just getting to know. And then you're going to build on that kind of quarter over quarter to help build the program. So it's really important that when you talk to senior management about this, or when you talk to your marketing department about this, it's not going to be perfect when you start. You have to have that sort of test and learn attitude to it, because you're going to learn as you go along and you're going to grow it as you go along. And then there's this kind of comment, which I'm interested to see if people have comments in the chat about this, which is, the success of a social selling program within a company is going to depend on how you've been treated before. So in some of the firms I've advised, or even my old firms, it's been banned. So you're not going to have immediate success with advisors on LinkedIn if they've been punished previously for using it. So hopefully the culture within the firm changes now post-pandemic, that social media is something everybody's encouraged to do. They're encouraged to do it through their own personal LinkedIn profile. And it's encouraged, not punished. And that we're going to talk about how you guys can think about like a marketer, but it's really about sharing your personality. So the way to think about it isn't, gosh, I have to distribute all this boring corporate content and that'll get me clients. It has to be about, well, what do I feel? What do I like? What gets me up in the morning? And then I'm going to share that personality on LinkedIn. That's what's going to win for you. And that sort of authentic personality has got to be where it comes from. And that's the great thing about social media, is it's one of the few channels you have control over as an advisor, and that's not quite so staid as maybe some of your other corporate channels. Content, we're going to talk a little bit more about content in a minute, but you should have this mix of corporate content and third-party content. Don't just post stuff from your company. It's boring. Do that only about 25% of the time. 75% of the time, you should be posting something that's relevant to your audience. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then carve out the time to do it. So where a lot of these programs fail is advisors don't have time to do it. So we make sure that your assistants on your desks are empowered to help if you want them to sort of do your Monday posts, and then you don't have to worry about it. Make sure that the mobile is empowered for all your advisors. So we find that a lot of people procure a tool and then the tool doesn't work on mobile. So what's the point? Because you want people to be able to do this on the hop, on trains, or on their commute or at home when they're thinking about it. And most people engage in social media through their mobile. Automated campaigns are an easy way for advisors to do. Like, let's say your marketing department has a whole campaign about ESG investing. They should be able to just push that out for you over LinkedIn on social. That should be easy for you. And then you have more time to think about the personal things you want to post about it. So there's lots of ways a good program and a good tool and good content should make it really a whole lot easier for advisors to do this day to day. And then it, as I said, it should be all about measurement. Typically, if people start a program and they have a tool, they'll only have a certain number of seats on that tool. So you want to make sure those seats are getting used by people who are really engaged and really social selling, and not let those seats languish with people that aren't doing anything. So this is where we get into the piece about thinking like a marketer. And I'm sure most salespeople, have a good idea of who their buyers are, like who their clients are, who their target market is. And that has to kind of drive everything you're doing on social media. So I'll give the example of entrepreneurs. That's when we did a lot at UBS.
We're on the slide with the social selling. I don't know if you've moved the slide on.
I have. Can you see the one with the purple?
We're on the slide with why social selling is top priority.
Oh, I'm like 4 slides in. It says it's paused. I don't know why it's paused. Let me stop and start over again.
Okay, no problem.
Can you see that?
Social selling programs. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. So that was the one I actually just did. Can you see that one?
Yep, perfect.
Okay. So this one has some purple dots.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, think like a marketer. Think about who your target audience is. So if it's entrepreneurs, think about who are the credible people to link to. So one of the examples from my old firm was an ultra high net worth advisor who was really targeting very powerful entrepreneurs that had sold previous businesses and were about to sell again. And so who he linked to in his network on LinkedIn, he made sure he only linked to people that were credible. So other people in mezzanine finance, other people in merchant banks, other people in, say, tech entrepreneur startups, so that when those entrepreneurs that he was trying to get a connection to and build a relationship with checked out who he was connected to, he looked highly credible to them. So there is a piece here around being a little bit careful who you're connected to and curating what your network looks like. You can also be connected to other introducers or other thought leaders or journalists that are really powerful in that space. That can really help build your credibility when somebody you're trying to connect to checks out who you are and where you sit in the ecosystem that you're trying to market to.
You also see people, like, you see how many mutual connections you have, don't you? So if you notice in the small industry, like in the private client industry, if you have sort of 500, 600, 1,000 shared connections, I occasionally find people with that, you think, oh, right, that's a real reference point, isn't it? It's evidence of being in the space.
And then at the bottom, I say choose the right social network. So if your business is connecting with, I don't know, people in hotels or leisure, then you might want to think about Instagram. If your business is, if you're an IFA with a really local business, then Facebook has great local groups that are just for your town. So you can use other social networks and use the same methodology that we're talking about with LinkedIn, and it works, the same way across other networks. So, I mean, most of the cases in private wealth are LinkedIn driven, but there's certainly things across other. So if you're all about next gen or you're all about young investors, then, other networks might be better than LinkedIn. And then it gets to the sort of content piece. So relevant corporate content. So if you're really focused on entrepreneurs, then use the corporate content about entrepreneurs. You don't need to be posting about professionals or other segments if that's not who your target market is, and then use it sparingly. So use it only about 25% of the time. And if you do post corporate content, always put a comment on there that gives your personal spin on it. So give them your opinion.
There's a question here from Keith Heddle from Mackrell. Keith, thanks for your question. What's your view about company pages on LinkedIn? How can they add value?
I mean, company pages typically don't get a lot of engagement, and not many people kind of follow them and use them. Where they can add value is if, let's say you don't have a tool, it's a good place to put a lot of good corporate content, and then you as a user can go check on that corporate page and post it back into your personal feed. So I've seen marketing departments do that. I mean, I think it should have a good feel for what the company wants to stand for. So one example I've seen, which is actually Instagram, is the company decided that Instagram was going to be all about ESG and sustainable and philanthropy. So as a corporate page, everything out there was around this one theme that they thought was relevant and resonated on Instagram and had beautiful photography. So then it sort of showed what the company was about on that channel. And then when you saved it, it just made it more relevant for you as an advisor. And then for third-party content, that probably is one of the biggest pieces to think through, is how are you sourcing your third-party content? How are you making it easy for you on a day-to-day basis? So like I have a Google News alert that I have set up for what I'm looking for, and I get that once every couple of weeks, and then I troll through that, decide what I want to post, because usually you're posting third-party content that's really relevant from the Wall Street Journal or Forbes or whoever, and then I'm commenting on it. So I did one from The Economist yesterday. You can use tools like Feedly or News Now, which are sort of just news aggregators that will take your search terms, so say it's tech entrepreneurs, and get those pieces of content into your inbox that then you can use. I'm hoping, nobody in this space is sort of limited by what third-party content they can share. Sometimes that's a battle with compliance, but it really should be your first port of call about what you're posting, because it's much more relevant.
What about stuff behind a paywall? So say if you read an article that you're a subscriber to, you want to share that on LinkedIn. I mean, sometimes I do a sort of screenshot of paragraphs out of an FT article, share that and put a comment on it. Now, you're probably not supposed to do that, but what's the most effective way, do you think, of sharing just some tiny bit of insight from that, like third-party sources?
Yeah, I would summarize the bits you find relevant.
Yeah.
So like 3 bullet points of what you think are the most important parts of that article. And LinkedIn gives you, quite a few characters at the top of that page when you're sharing content to do a quick summary, because then if people are subscribers, they can read the whole thing. But if not, you've just done what any editor would do, which is boil it down to the important and interesting parts. So I'm going to go on to the next slide, which is these sort of life moments.
Right.
And when you think about social media, actually, depending on your network that you're engaged with, your prospects and clients on, there are social signals. So when you get a new job, LinkedIn typically sort of flags it up. If you're on Facebook, a lot of you people will be posting about kids and children and families going on. So those are all social signals that can mean that you as an advisor can start a conversation about these big life moments. So I think within financial services, and definitely within private wealth, we've all sort of decided that this is one of the best ways to engage with people. In these key moments of transition for people is when they engage with money and planning and wills and all these things. And actually, hopefully your marketing department is giving you content for all these moments in time. Hopefully you've got sort of a shelf of all sorts of content that really doesn't become dated. So when I was a marketing head, we knew we had investment content that had to be fresh because it's about the markets right now. But then we were making content about retirement that people could use a year from now and it would still be relevant. So I would definitely start thinking about life stages for your target audience. So if we go back to entrepreneurs, it's typically as they're about to exit their business, when they exit their business, and then those first few months or few years after they exit the business. Like, this is one of these huge transitions in their life that they're engaging with advisors. And so we had content targeted to that at my old firm that really helped with those conversations. And then because of the people you're targeting, they're going to read that content on social because they're worried about it at the moment. So divorce, widowhood being another one that comes up a lot for women. There's some really good content out there. And I really like joint content. So a law firm and a bank kind of working together to jointly create content because it covers both sides of the coin on a lot of these topics.
Do you think that creates more visibility online if you've got multiple intermediary firms sharing things from different angles? I mean, we certainly find that.
Yeah, it just makes it more credible. Because I guess the important part about these next two slides about thinking about your clients is you're not selling products. I mean, I don't know many people in banking or in our industry that still sell products. You're thinking about how you help them. And that's the most important mind shift change. In the early days of my career, we were all pushing products, and it just doesn't work very well. And the regulator doesn't like it either.
Do you think also on these moments in life, it also depends on the type of client you're dealing with? Like if you're dealing with a city professional, for example, who's high net worth by many standards, but not in the private banking sense of high net worth, their pension and retirement and ISAs are really important to them. But if you're talking about a private banking client with, multi-million pound portfolios or non-doms, that pensions just won't speak to them. So it's about, I suppose, looking at your proposition, and then although we all live a life that looks the same in many features, the things that really grab those clients is going to depend where they are on the wealth spectrum, isn't it? And what you talk to them about.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, entrepreneur exit isn't going to resonate for everybody. But I think there are things like, having children or becoming empty nesters or getting married that sort of resonate for everyone. I mean, the point about retirement is typically in the industry, we've talked about retirement like a single point in time. And it's like this cliff edge of you work and then you don't work. And that's how nobody is doing it at all anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, my husband would like to, but I don't think he will either. So most people are doing this sort of gradation of retirement. They're having a second career. They're doing portfolio careers. They're doing a bit of advisory work on the side. So that retirement picture should actually be 4 or 5 pictures around it, because people are having lots of second acts and having very active retirement. So I mean, that's one of those areas that's very ripe for a change in conversation about how we talk about it. Of course, there's this pension moment in some of the high net worth affluent spaces that everybody has to talk about, but I think that'll change what it looks like a lot in the next few years.
Great.
And then segments. So, I mean, as long as I've worked in the industry, these were sort of some of our typical segments where we're thinking through what's driving these people, what do they need. I talked through the entrepreneur example. One of my clients, we're talking about female clients at the moment. So even if you're an IFA or you're not at the ultra high net worth end of the spectrum, women will have a different planning challenge to some men. So they'll have career breaks. They'll typically paid less. They might have given less into their pension. So they're a different kind of client challenge in a lot of ways. There's all this divorce and widowhood issues around a lot of women and their planning. And then they typically think holistically around the whole family. So they'll bring children into it. They really want the whole family to be looked after, not just the primary breadwinner. So I think there's a whole piece in the industry around making sure we service women correctly. I know you do a lot of work, David, with the res non-dom and expat world. We've always done a lot of things like you've done, where you have, different advisors, lawyers, accountants talking about Spanish, talking about French issues as they come into the UK. Those are all really interesting. And of course, expats like me, Americans, have lots of issues and are just sort of ripe for tons of content because we're so complex. The one thing I would flag here, which I think is interesting, but for everybody to think about, is there's a big difference between younger clients, so millennials and Gen Z, and next gen. And I find in the industry, they sometimes get conflated, like they're one and the same. And I think, we're coming up to this big point where baby boomers are going to be passing on their wealth. And the next gen for baby boomer wealth is we're old. We're not that young. So I would make those two distinct segments in your strategies or in how you're thinking about people, because the next gen is different. They can be older, maybe they've never had money before, and then they suddenly are wealthy because they finally inherited. But it's a slightly different issue and set of situations than a real true young investor that's just getting started, just having their first few pensions. Maybe they're entrepreneurs looking for their first few loans. So they're different segments, and that's how I would approach it.
Do you think then also the method of communication for millennials and Gen Z is different, or is it the same? I mean, if you look at entrepreneurs and non-doms, and to a certain extent females of a certain generation, you'd expect to communicate them through certain methods, whether that's LinkedIn is so widely adopted now, we'd say LinkedIn, email, some conventional channels. To actually approach millennials and Gen Z, do you need to do something different, or actually is that a myth? You do the same, but you just make the content relevant, or do you need to think of a different way of speaking to this client segment?
I mean, I do think they're on totally different channels, and I don't think many people in the industry are on TikTok yet.
Yeah.
So I do think you need to think through your channels. I mean, Instagram a few years ago was considered really cutting edge, and now I think it's pretty mainstream. So, and the language they're using, the way they're talking through certain issues is different. So yeah, I think they're quite different. I mean, I think in private wealth, we don't come across them very much. When I did do a millennial strategy at my last firm, where we did come across them was these really wealthy entrepreneurs. They had started, Spotify, and they then had great wealth in their 30s. And so the younger clients were really looking for lending, and they were looking to build a relationship with a wealth manager that they were going to get the lending and then give the money back to them as they matured. So I think in our industry, where they really come into play is if you're one of these private banks that can lend, and then really building that, lovely. Most entrepreneurs will end up putting their wealth with the firm that lent to them the first time. So then you almost end up like talking to your private equity, your venture capital department in the bank, thinking, who should I lend to, because they're going to have a great business in the future. And they are definitely into sustainable investing. I mean, we now see that all the way across the whole spectrum of all these segments. But they definitely, were the first flying the flag for you have to have a strong sustainable and impact investing offering.
Okay, thanks. A question from Joe Hodgins. Kirsten, how easily does targeted marketing dovetail with client suitability? And if not, is it best to keep posts generic so to avoid any potential mis-selling, internal compliance wrangling? So that's the big question around how can you make targeted posts, but also not land yourself in compliance difficulties? How do you strike that balance?
So I would strike that balance in not talking about product really at all. So as soon as you start to talk about a product, then you worry about suitability, then you worry about financial promotions rules, and then you sometimes have to get pre-approval from compliance. So, but if you're talking about life and what's going on in their life and what they need with planning or sort of general financial planning topics, I had a kind of blanket approval from compliance that those were all fine. If it didn't trigger financial promotions, you could post it however you wanted. And typically what you're posting as third-party content isn't pushing product either. I mean, I would be having those conversations with compliance around, I don't know, sexier topics around, I don't know, Bitcoin or things like that, that that goes back to the marketing department giving you kind of clear guardrails, and then within this kind of program, having you be as active as possible. But obviously you're going to depress the whole program if everybody's worried about suitability and compliance as they post. So again, it's great to have a program. It's great to have a tool. Everything on that tool should be pre-approved and ready for you to post however you feel like it, because that's sort of the definition of success. If there's a different question in there about suitability and segmented marketing, yes. There is a bit of work going on with some of my clients around suitability can feel like a really dry process that's driven by compliance as you onboard clients, and wouldn't it be better for financial planning and compliance to get together and you have a suitability conversation that's much more holistic and much more sort of attached to real life? So I do know firms that are trying to do that right now, and that's going to be a much better client experience as you're onboarding.
Okay, excellent. Well, it'd be interesting to hear from our audience. Do put in the chat if on this segmentation piece, have you had success segmenting your client base, talking to them in different ways on different channels? Put your comments in the chat, and we might bring that back on later. But don't be shy. Do share with us your experience. Please carry on.
Okay, so my last chunk is just about working with your marketing department, and this is your typical kind of marketing and sales funnel. And the top of the funnel traditionally was filled up by marketing with some kind of group marketing, broader sort of brand building. And then it flowed down the funnel. And as somebody got interested, you got passed over to a salesperson or advisor. And then that advisor sort of closed the sale. That's still very valid. Hopefully your marketing department is still passing you what are called qualified leads. So, I mean, one of my clients has Google AdWords set up. They get tons of inquiries. Somebody sort of vets those inquiries and then hands them off to an advisor to follow up. So that is still a process I hope is happening. But in the new environment, because we're all digital all day, all the time, it has to be much more collaborative. And it should be that marketing can help you through this whole funnel. And there's lots of sort of points of collaboration I'm going to talk about how sort of the two departments should be working together to have the most success across the whole funnel. And actually, there's kind of like we said with corporate channels on LinkedIn, there's almost duplicate channels here to manage. So you as an advisor have your LinkedIn pages, and then the company has their LinkedIn pages. So they really should complement each other. And you as an advisor now has probably more power than you've ever had, because you manage your own channels. You can do your own email thing, you can do your own social media thing, you can do your own blogs and vlogs sometimes. So you really have a lot of power as an advisor to have your channels. Hopefully your personality comes through and all that. So that's what I'm going to talk about, is how these two departments should really be working hand in hand. There is a piece at the top with brand building that most marketing departments will still have a hat that they wear, where they're off doing PR and campaigns and sponsorships and building the brand. So, I mean, where I ran into problems in the past is advisors coming to my marketing department and thinking we were 100% devoted to them in the front in sales all day long. Well, actually, it's only about, I don't know, 60% of my job, because the rest of my job is doing what the bigger company or the bigger brand wants me to do. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But as we go through the funnel, there's all sorts of areas where, you know, you should be talking to your marketing department every day, every week, about things you can do together. So we've talked through social media and segments, really important for how the departments work together. Education. So a lot of advisors will have somebody they know is going to become a client in the next couple of years, but they want to give them some client education so that they learn more about how to manage their wealth before they come in. There's this intermediaries piece where you as an advisor will have relationships with lawyers and accountants. How can the marketing department help amplify that? There's this whole sort of joint content piece. So like we were talking about with Resin on Dom, maybe you're going to do content pieces together and marketing is going to help you do that. When you get further down the funnel, there should be a nurture campaign. So you as an advisor have some prospects. They seem warm. They're an entrepreneur that's going to exit in the next 2-3 years, but you want to keep a conversation with them. So your marketing department should have an email nurture program that you can just give them the email address and they will get an email from the corporate every 6 months to keep them warm. So there's lots of kind of collaboration points across the top of the funnel.
What do you think on the education side about, you know, podcasts and things like that for educate? So for keeping someone warm, not selling, really trying to sort of, you know, deliver some value. I mean, I've seen, you know, for example, Waverton have a very good Why Invest podcast. That's something they've got off the ground. It's hard to get these things going. It's hard for them to be interesting, isn't it? Do you think? What's your perspective on, should firms be looking at, do they do a podcast? Would the return, you know, merit the amount of effort they put in? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's really important. There are a couple schools of thought. So, I mean, where I see it being really powerful is you talk about this idea of generous brands. So brands that are going to give away some of their insights for free, because that's how social media and the web works now. And I think it's really important to be generous with some of those insights. I mean, as an example, I'm an American, so everything is confusing to me. Like if a brand is willing to give me some of those answers, can I use a 529 plan? Then great.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, all those educational endeavors tend to pay off in the end. One of my clients does a lot of that, and you do see it pay off. There is another school of thought that it some populations, let's just say women, are a little bit distrustful because they feel like you're trying to sell them something. So maybe they would prefer to get education from a completely unbiased third party. But then when you think about that as a firm, that's another opportunity to add value. So maybe you have an affiliation with an unbiased brand, I don't know, Pearson, or I did a stint at the Money and Pension Service, which is run by the government and has lots of good education. So maybe you're just pointing your clients to somewhere else to get their education. But I think there does need to be an acknowledgement that financial education is poor in this country. And so most clients will need to have a bit of a process of that before they feel really comfortable talking to you about, I don't know, structured products.
Sure.
And I think that that's a great way to help build relationships. At Action, I have this piece sort of underlined here about tracking success for measurement and investment. So at that point of conversion, at that point they go from prospect to client, is so important that you track it. So you could have a loving relationship with marketing. You could be doing all sorts of stuff together. If you don't help them measure, they're going to hate you, because their whole marketing budget for the year is based on their success and measurement. So hopefully within your organization, you have CRM and tools that make that tracking and measurement piece quite easy. But if it isn't, if it is a manual email, if it is a spreadsheet, please fill out the spreadsheets, because that means they'll just love you more in the future that you've helped them track success. Because most marketing departments, if they do a big program, but they get nothing out of it, it's not going to happen again. So if they do a big program with you and your, pod of advisors or lawyers, you're going to have to measure it and prove that it did something for it to ever happen again, because otherwise it just gets killed. So I can't emphasize enough how important that measurement piece is, or even stories. I can't tell you, I'm still telling stories of success from my advisors back in the day, because the stories and of the success of a certain program or marketing campaign are super important as well.
I guess that can be difficult where you've got a very competitive, naturally banks are competitive places. You've got bankers with big targets. If they start doing something that works, there's almost a feeling that I'll keep that to myself because that works and I don't want everyone else doing it. It's trying to create, I suppose, a culture that people win as a team. I've been in organizations where definitely people won as individuals. And so any success, people would keep quiet because they wanted to keep working that tool. Others, people did genuinely pull together. And that led to obviously better results. But it's a cultural thing, is it, do you think, as well?
I don't know. That makes me sad if there's still firms that are like that. Because when you talk about digital channels, and they cost money, time, energy, organization to measure, to get running, all these things. So if you're going to get help in these digital channels, you're going to have to amplify that across a whole organization or a whole department. And so when you go to the marketing department, you should be thinking, well, gosh, this is working for me. I should help my friends. I should help my desk mates.
Sure.
And it's a bit like doing a sponsorship too, from the olden days. If you come and you say you want £100,000 to do a bicycle thing because it's a wonderful sponsorship, like if you don't share that across your desk, you're never going to get it signed off. So I think the most productive relationships I always had were with advisors that thought a little bit bigger than just their own success.
100% believe in that. I mean, just sort of slightly related to closing business. I mean, I've spoke to a lot of financial advisors over this period that have found it hard to close new business with clients on a virtual basis. Now, that's something about these extraordinary times. But do you think it's partly if that client hasn't perhaps had enough of the top end of the funnel, in a sense of they've not really heard enough of they've not bought into the offering sufficiently in order to have the confidence to agree to open a relationship with them? Do you think it is possible to create new relationships purely digitally without meeting, or do you think that it always requires, in the final step, a physical meeting in order to actually progress? There's a lot you can obviously do digitally to prepare the ground, but ultimately, do you think you can close that new business without the physical aspect?
I mean, I think there's a couple different questions there, and I'm going to get into the next chunk, which is a good liaison to due diligence. So I think most clients will want to do due diligence, and some of these things I'll talk about next, like client counsels, are a great way to provide sort of references to future clients from existing clients, and that can be immensely powerful, especially for big tickets. I think there's another question around just pure robo-advisory, and are people ever going to be willing to give £500,000 into a product online? That is tough, and the industry has struggled with that. And I think there's a level of ticket that you do need to talk to a human being before you'll invest online. Big money online, just hit invest. I still don't see it a whole lot, other than say day traders who are very used to that sort of environment. But I think I'll touch on what you just asked, David, in this next chunk. So client satisfaction, I still think it's so important that firms are doing an annual client satisfaction survey, that they're getting the texture of what their clients are saying. Individual advisors can have different stories and talk about different things, but until you look at it in aggregate, you don't know if you have a problem with your customer experience. You don't know if you have a problem with onboarding or the digital delivery or whatever it is. So important to do an annual survey, because then you get to your net promoter scores, and then are your clients recommending you to other clients? Because we started out this presentation in saying that this was the second biggest area, social media. First biggest area is still referrals. So this second half of the funnel, which funnily enough, I still don't see many marketing departments that really own this, and they really need to. You need to own client satisfaction, client experience, and all those touch points after you become clients. And marketing can help fine tune all that, because it's still so important for referrals. And then client counsels are really powerful. I would definitely recommend them to everybody. So taking a sample of your clients, inviting them into a council, running sessions with them to really understand what makes them tick, really understand what resonates with your brand. They can be really powerful. So for creating new propositions. So when I was building a female proposition, I had a client council of women help me build that. When I was building, entrepreneur propositions, I had a client council to help me build that. It's a great way to get insights sort of into the firm. And also for senior management that are used to kind of coming into individual sales meetings, they love a client council because they just get to sit there and listen to their clients talk about what their experience has been with the firm. So, I mean, from my previous experiences, one of the most powerful things a marketing department can do is this client experience piece. And it should feed the top of your funnel. So it sort of loops back around and can create great content that will feed the top of your funnel. It's about getting into the sort of texture of what makes your firm unique and how you're going to sell it in the future.
Okay, great. There is just a question in the Q&A, slightly unrelated, but I'll ask it now. It's from Melanie Griffiths from Equim. Thank you, Melanie, for your question. How do you advise balancing different areas of your life on LinkedIn? For example, Melanie is a NED and feels really passionate about the work they do as a charity, but it's unrelated to the day job. So how do you kind of represent yourself on social media in the full, bring your whole self to social media, if you like?
Yeah, I mean, I think exactly that. Bring your whole self to social media. I mean, hopefully, again, there's no limitations on that from your firm. And I think, again, it's that personality coming through. So if you feel passionate about it, you should put it on LinkedIn. I mean, I do think that there is a bit of a thing happening on LinkedIn where people are being much more personal. And whenever it gets like too personal, you'll hear people comment like, this is still a professional site. Like, I don't need to know about your dogs and your cats. But I think that there is that personal thing that's really important. Like, I'm a Cub Scout leader. I put that on LinkedIn. So I think those extra NED positions should add a lot of color, because just to feed on maybe your day job all day, it's the same as posting corporate content all day. It can be a little bit dull.
Okay, thank you.
Can you see that next slide?
Absolutely, yeah.
So this just is sort of a summary of the areas I was talking about. So work with your marketing department to create content, work with your marketing department on segments. So if you've uncovered this new segment of, I don't know, res non-doms from Italy, you should be running to your marketing department and say, look, this is untapped, we can help here. Let's build some content. Let's get going. And I mean, I didn't do that many paid campaigns over the years. I really relied on my advisors to do a lot of unpaid work. So they're using their organic connections on social to build a marketing plan. So that relationship is really important. Leads, hopefully your marketing department is sending you leads. Younger advisors that are trying to build their book of business should be the first ones to raise their hands and be on the leads, be managing the leads. Again, that's a very iterative process between marketing and sales. So if you're getting leads, but they're not quite right, you should be going back to your marketing department saying, don't bid on that Google AdWords on state pensions. I'm just getting a bunch of sort of gobbledygook about people's questions about state pensions, but they're not my clients. So that's, again, a very iterative process, working hand in hand with marketing. If you're trying to build your book, marketing should be giving you great leads. And then client insights is another big area of cooperation. So work with them on when they build client councils, work with them on flagging up, I don't know, issues you're hearing from your clients, like client experience issues, flag that up with them. You can go talk to operations, of course, too. But I tend to think that the best marketing departments have a bit of a responsibility for the overall client experience to make sure in a digital world that they're fine-tuning things along the way. And then, NPS should be a shared metric. When you get your NPS score at the end of the year, you should both be throwing a party about it because it's how you both work together. So hopefully that feels like a really shared point of collaboration. So both the leads coming in and following up, and then the NPS because your clients are recommending you to their next referrals, really important kind of point to work hand in hand. And then this is my last slide, and then we've got time for questions.
Right.
So just my tips for working with marketing. So respect the non-sales part of their job. So if you go jump up and down by their desk, and this is, of course, figurative because we're all at home right now, about sales support all day, they have other jobs to do. They have other people kind of, talking to them all day about different other things they need to do to build the brand. So kind of respect that they wear lots of different hats. Go tell them about your client insights and client types. That's what they want. They want people to come to them and share with them like a persona of who they're having success with so that they can build a marketing plan around it. Make them your partner in digital marketing because these marketing tools online are not going to work without some help behind them. So hopefully your marketing department is fully focused on all these channels and making them work. Partner on propositions. And this idea of cross-functional teams. So when I was building our women's proposition, I made sure I had a cross-functional team with compliance, finance, operations, salespeople, marketing, everybody sort of looking at that whole segment. We were coming together with our clients to build the next proposition for how it was going to be better for clients. I think back to your point, David, on think about what's working for you and how it can help others. Hopefully you're in a culture that lets you do that. And help them measure, help them prove ROI, make sure you're helping them fill out their spreadsheets if that's what it is on measurement and success, because without it, nothing happens in a firm typically. And then for me, like the people I loved working with in sales or as advisors, they were the ones that got the new ideas and opportunities. So if you are a good partner to marketing, you're going to be the one who gets the best ideas, the best opportunities, the best new channels, the best leads. It can be a real big way for you to build your business by making sure that you've got a good relationship there.
Okay, well, thank you for that. We've got a comment in there from Tim Barber. Thanks, Tim, for your comment. Great to have you with us. Saying it's a tough one regarding personal stuff on LinkedIn because he's not interested in pictures of cats and dogs, but but one of his most popular posts of last year was something advocating getting screened for prostate cancer, which had nearly 30,000 views. So some things do cut through because it's got more of an emotional connection. So it's not sharing nonsense, but it's about sharing the things that really mean to you, I guess, really mean something, I guess. That was
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest posts of the year was the guy, he worked for HSBC. I think he was a Brit, and he was sitting in the hospital talking about when he was having a heart attack. He thought, gosh, this is inconvenient because I've got a call coming up. And that went global. So yeah, I think you got to be personal and have a personality on all these channels.
Okay, well, do get your questions in. We've got 10 minutes left, so do put your questions in. I've got one for Kristen for now, but do put the questions in the chat. We had before on Louise Donoghue, who was talking about campaigns and managing and measuring campaigns, and saying that the use of microsites is quite interesting because you can, for your specific segment, then create a real specific customer journey through a landing page, and then and you can really monitor that in a way that on your generic corporate website, it's very hard to trace the customer journey. I mean, what's your perspective on that, and how firms can make little tactical campaigns quite nimbly and really monitor what they're doing through the use of websites in a way that historically you'd go for the big corporate website and maybe a page within it. What's your take on?
Yeah,
I
mean, it's sort of a technical marketing question. At UBS, they loved a microsite, and we had thousands of them. So if you go all the way down the microsite strategy, you can end up with this sort of proliferation of microsites that lead nowhere. And so it can be good if they're managed well and they're only up for the period of the campaign and then they come down. I mean, I tend to think with parameterization, with sort of tracking of different things you're doing online, and you can still track them when they come back to your site. It depends on how sophisticated your main site is at keeping the cookies, and cookies laws are changing, and it's all very technical. But yeah, I mean, I think it can be good, but it just has to be managed right, because otherwise you'll end up with a dead microsite, I don't know, that you built 5 years ago for Italians that just isn't maintained.
Okay, and what about on email marketing? You know, are generic data, large collections of historic emails? How do you kind of keep those databases relevant, fresh, effective, segmented, clean? You know, is there what's your take on how firms should approach the email data they might collect?
Yeah, I mean, again, the ideal scenario is that you've got a CRM, and you've got a good CRM that you are putting prospects into, and that when they convert to clients, they convert over. That doesn't happen for various reasons sometimes, but that you've got a clean CRM of client data too. I mean, again, it doesn't happen everywhere because tools are old and they don't talk to each other and stuff like that. With prospect email lists, I again would really work collaboratively with marketing to clean those lists over time. So we didn't have a great CRM, so we did sort of an annual cleaning exercise to make sure in those prospect lists they were staying fresh. But yeah, again, it's something that your marketing department should be on top of, and sort of keeping procedures on it and making sure that it stays up to date, because the data can get old. And I think CRMs have to be more sophisticated than they used to be, because I know we had a lot of clients that had 2 different emails. I mean, I have 2 different emails. So they'll want like fun content to go to one email, but they want their account summaries to go to a different email. So good modern CRMs should be able to do that. Okay, thanks. Question from Melanie Griffiths on, is there anything you should keep off LinkedIn? So is there something that you should, a personal message that's, with some of the content, is there something best to hold back, or how do you have the evergreen content that we were mentioning about different stages of like that? That's great as a kind of for everyone, but how do you kind of hold back some privileged content that you can kind of share with people on a more personalized basis than putting it fully accessible online? Is there anything around that? Yeah. So, I mean, I had sort of there's lots of different theories on content, but I'll talk you through one of them. So I had almost 3 buckets of content. So I had corporate content on LinkedIn that was for the corporate. I had stuff I was teeing up for advisors, so it's slightly different and really for the advisors to use. And then you had, as you come down the funnel and you start to have conversations, it gets more producty as it comes down. This is in maybe the banking world more than the legal world. And then there's this sort of crossover point where financial promotions hits and you're starting to talk more about product and more specific conversations about, well, what are you actually going to put me into? And then I think that those conversations come off social because they're too product driven, and they should be more kind of one-on-one, maybe an email followed by a conversation about this particular mortgage or loan or whatever the product is. So yeah, I would definitely think about those buckets. I mean, from a personal point of view, I think LinkedIn is, you know, a fantastic networking site. So I wouldn't talk ill of your employers. I wouldn't talk ill of your colleagues. I wouldn't talk ill of your ex-employers. You know, I would try to keep it. That's where LinkedIn has like a propriety to it because it's a jobs and professional driven site. It's different than Facebook. And then, you know, but of course, we're all talking to our kids about what they put on social, because somebody hiring them from a job 20 years from now will still look at what they put on social many years ago and they'll be able to see it. So it's that whole scary thing that once it goes on social, it's going to be there kind of forever.
Okay, great. Well, we've come to the end of our Power Hour. Thank you very much, Kristen, for joining us and sharing that with us. We'll share Kristen's details with the audience so that you can follow up with any specific questions. But thank you very much for a very enlightening session today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.